Big time fight coming up this weekend at strawweight. We have a couple of champs that were champs outside of the big show. And for Jinh Yu Frey, former Invicta atomweight champ, she went over to Ryzen. She tried to challenge for the belt, was unsuccessful. Came back over to Invicta and made things happen. 2-2 in the UFC is Frey, and she's taking on the Lil Monster, Vanessa Demopoulos, former LFA. Big time strawweight champ over there, and she wasn't able to get it done when she fought over with Dana White's Contender Series, a loss to Poppin. She goes back to the regional scene. Things play out the way that they play out, but always on the radar of the big promotion. Wasn't able to get the win against JJ Aldrich in her short notice UFC debut up a weight class, but for Demopoulos, she was able to get knocked down and then dragged him out against Silvana Gomez Juarez in her last fight. So for Demopoulos, it's been an odd run. She's a fighter that's been on the fans' radar for a long time. And maybe she's a part of your Amazon book club, obviously the author of the Stripper Bible.
No one brings this up more than you.
But if you look at it, because I want to go into the readings of both fighters. For Demopoulos, that's the claim to fame. For Jinh Yu Frey,
I feel like the FBI with Pusha T lyrics right now. You're deep diving.
If you look at it for Jinh Yu Frey, the background in nuclear medicine and radiological services, completely different book collection that they have going on at home. And when you look at their fight styles, similarities in some aspects and major differences in others. And the biggest thing that I wanted to hammer home on this one, Matt, I talk about it with Fight Night Picks, so I don't look at the odds. I don't look at the odds pre-fight. I clicked on best fight odds before I even did anything with this fight, and I went, oh my god, I gotta spit out my coffee. Jinh Yu Frey's a 3-1 favorite at open. What are we doing here? Like, 2-2 in the UFC, negative strike differential, 37% takedown percentage, for Jinh Yu Frey. It's just odd that when I look at that and I look at a fighter that's 2-2, I really have to take some pause and then really deep dive into the tape study on this one for Frey to be justified as a 3-1 favorite in the spot.
Exactly, and that's something we talk about quite a bit. You do have to justify being that big of a favorite in really any of your fights, because it does seem like there's one of these fights every single weekend where you have two fighters, maybe on 2-fight losing streaks, you don't really know what's going to happen for the rest of their career, and all of a sudden they're matched up, and one's like a 3-1 favorite over the other, and this is pretty much that exact situation. I do think Frey's whole experience is going to play a factor in this fight, just because I do feel like she has fought the higher level of competition throughout her fight. And that's the thing about Jinh Yu Frey. She's someone who came over who did have a number of losses on her way coming into the UFC. She didn't have this squeaky clean record. Like you said, she lost to So Hee Ham over in Road FC, actually. That was by TKO too.
And the big one is, again, So Hee Ham, but Hamasaki a couple of different times. Once with Invicta, but once with Ryzen as well. Like, those are like legends of the sport.
They really are. But this is the other thing about Jinh Yu Frey's career when you really want to break it down. Jinh Yu Frey, excuse me. Mina Grusander wins are weighed far too heavily. Like,
stink bomb.
The Boxing Hall of Fame induction ceremony was last weekend. They did 3 induction classes all in one just because they weren't able to have it due to the pandemic. And like Roy Jones Jr., I listened to a bunch of his interviews because he got inducted. And he was saying like, yeah, the reason I'm here is I beat James Toney. I beat Bernard Hopkins. They're also getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I made that look easy. Jinh Yu Frey's not going to sit at her UFC induction ceremony for the Hall of Fame and be like, yeah, I took down Mina Grusander and Invicta, show me my respect. I just feel like there's always been a certain level of hype for Frey coming into the UFC that we've never really seen justified once she came over here, because she was one of these 35-year-old prospects, if you will. I know even calling her a prospect is kind of weird because she was a champion on her way into the UFC, but just a newcomer, if you will, who was later on in her career, and it felt like she was seen as a potential threat, honestly, to the strawweight division, and then she had disappointing performance after disappointing performance, and I know she has been able to stabilize her career to a certain degree at this point, but her level of competition has not been overly high her last 2 fights, and that's why this one against Demopoulos is still going to be very much a learning experience, I think, for UFC fans for both these fighters.
Yeah, so for Jinh Yu Frey, she's been an underdog in all 4 of her UFC fights, and now she's a minus 300 favorite. Again, the odds have shifted, minus 275 right now as we tape this video on Sunday night. When you're an underdog for 4 fights, you go out there, you lose to Kay Hansen, which is fine, I guess. I mean, at the end of it, Hansen rallied, took her down, was able to get the submission. She loses to Loma Lookmanmi, who's well-rounded. I know she's known as a Muay Thai striker, but Loma will mix in the threat of the takedown, and it works great for her in her fight. So you look at those 2 ones, okay, you can scratch it. She beats Gloria De Paula, who laid an egg last weekend.
Turns out it's not that hard to do.
Maria Oliveira putting her to 6-5, so a win over Gloria De Paula, and then a win over Ashley Yoder last time out. She looked very good in that Yoder fight. For Yoder, she's kind of tricky in every aspect of MMA, but for Jinh Yu Frey, what made it count was 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, cross, and then left hook. Like, she's able to mix in a couple of things, but it was just 1-2 city. Very few leg kicks there from Frey. Very basic in it, but successful at what she's good at. Genesis BJJ is the home, and if you look at it, and I'll throw the picture up there, she's also mixed it up with 10th Planet, training with such figures as Luis J. Gomez, noted podcaster. So a lot of fun there for Jinh Yu Frey. But again, Fortis MMA, Genesis BJJ. We've seen her train with Emily Ducati, who's now in the UFC, so that's a lot of fun. But I do look at it for Frey. Again, much more polished when it comes to striking. We talked a lot about Frey. Let's talk about Vanessa Demopoulos, Matt, because I go through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, training with Tabitha Ricci in Southern California, but also it's big that Demopoulos has switched her camp up to fight ready, and I see Tabitha Ricci in the last couple of weeks going over, traveling there to train with her. I think that's a perfect training partner in a fight against Frey, because Frey can threaten the takedown, big with the ground and pound. Yes, she does have submission abilities, but for Vanessa Demopoulos, wild as hell on the feet.
Not in a good way either.
No.
Not like in a Yair Rodriguez, wow, this is awesome.
We're dropping our hands. We're going to throw some kicks. We're going to throw some odd angle shots. We're going to go completely wild with the striking. And then when it comes to her grappling, odd when it comes to her takedowns, good off of her back, but you don't ever want to be on your back when you're grappling. Like I said that about Guram Kutateladze last weekend, and he was able to have some fun. He didn't have to fight off his back. But Demopoulos specializes off her back, and when you're losing fights to people like Sam Hughes to then get an inverted triangle with your legs, like, these aren't things that I talk about all that often. Demopoulos is a fighter that can do that. She can really accentuate how good and how tricky and slick she is with her grappling. But Matt, all this to say, a minus 300 favorite in a very close fight. I have a hard time with this one.
So do I. Again, I think this fight's really just Demopoulos needs to take down, Frey needs to keep it on the feet, and it's almost as simple as that. I do think Frey can steal moments and maybe even a round in that top position, because Demopoulos is susceptible to getting into those Louis Smolka positions where she can be held down, trying to go for a submission a little bit too much, but Demopoulos' activity is really her key with her submission ability. She's very active on the feet and on the mat, and it normally does pay off in her fights. I just don't know if it's going to pay off against someone who is as experienced as Frey in these matchups, and I do think for Frey, early on in her UFC career, the physicality of these strawweights was a little bit too much for her, but the good thing is, Demopoulos is about as small as someone at this division can be. It's not like she's fighting a Marina Rodriguez who would look like she's 4 divisions bigger than her, so I do think for Frey, she's fighting someone much closer to her own style. She is the physically stronger person in this fight, and I do think that she can steal some moments in that top position, and on the feet, I do like Frey, so I'm not even worried about the odds, because I couldn't imagine putting money on a fight like this, but I do think Jinh Yu Frey is the safer pick, and at the end of the week, we don't figure out what the odds are and then make our picks. We just see who's right and wrong on each and every one. So I do think Jinh Yu Frey is the more consistent fighter, because I think she can win on the feet and on the ground, whereas I only think Demopoulos can have success on the ground.
Frey open minus 300, minus 275. For Demopoulos open a plus 250, plus 220. We have a look at the Tapology votes. Surprise to us, there to you. I'm going to say over under 75% Frey.
I'll say under.
I'm going to say, oh my goodness. 547 total votes, 74% Frey, 93% by decision for the 26% that have Demopoulos, 57% by decision, 35% by submission. Listen, I mean, Bronco Country, let's ride. I'm going to go with Jinh Yu Frey in this one. It's an awkward one. Demopoulos, though, again, she has a hard time figuring out range and distance when it comes to the striking. And when it comes to basic combinations, Jinh Yu Frey goes out there and looks like Russell Wilson throwing touchdowns. So for me, I'm going to go with Jinh Yu Frey as well. Again, not the most common to pick. When you're going with a minus 300 favorite, Jinh Yu Frey, against Vanessa Demopoulos, if you're laying that chalk, you know, the spirit be with you, I guess. It's an awkward spot to be at.
I thought you were going to explode. You sounded like a volcano about to erupt. Yeah, I think Jinh Yu Frey is going to win. I hate the odds on this fight, though, because they don't make any sense whatsoever. Like, Demopoulos could lose 3 fights in a row and be gone and no one would be surprised, and the same thing could happen for Jinh Yu Frey. Probably not the nicest way I could have broken down this fight, but that's kind of what my ending statement is going to be. I like Jinh Yu Frey just because, again, I do think she is the more well-rounded out of these two fighters, but if Demopoulos can get in that top position on the ground, I do think she will be active enough to threaten with submissions.
I'm just trying to make it as awkward as Russ did. Let's ride.
I hate all that. Let's ride. Go Hogs.
Let's ride. Matt, let's ride. We've got Texas's own Jinh Yu
Future
Frey
versus Russell Wilson. Who you got? Future without a doubt.
Future all day. Matt, big time fight coming up this weekend, and in the main event, holy smokes, Arman Tsarukyan taking on Mateusz Gamrot. Can't wait for it. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.